written about each other, condemning each other of terrorism. I don't want to bring a debate here or anything, but certainly you Muslims have been supporting terrorism for a while in Iran, Egypt, Palestine, everywhere. Christian side, the dispute between both of you, Catholic and Protestant, in Ireland. Before that, in Germany, you have a long history of terrorism too. Actually, some people say it started with you in Europe. We have it in Japan. We have it everywhere. Big deal. Both of you come here and say, well, we don't support it. It's not in the Bible, nor in the Quran. They are responsible. But as a person walking the street, I suffer from both of you. How terrorism, how you view terrorism, and what is going on in those countries where people who are not Christian suffering, and where people who are not Muslims are targeted with the Islamic terrorism.
Two quick answers.
Please.
One is terrorism is a non-religious issue, and therefore I think we need to approach it on a universal basis. And second, terrorism usually points to something deeper, and therefore it's very important to look at the root causes. Is it unemployment? Is it lack of opportunity for dissent? Is it lack of opportunity to work? I mean, there are many causes. And I think we need to work at the deeper root causes and seek to eradicate those causes, because terrorism thrives in a climate when people are deprived of the opportunity to fulfill themselves. So.
Terrorism, I meant that I believe something that you don't believe, therefore I'm terrorizing you or terrorizing me. Not because unemployment or social justice or anything like that. I'm talking basically for religious beliefs.
There are cases of, terrorism based upon religious fanaticism, but I would say they're also grounded in social and political conditions.
I fully agree, and in fact, I find it objectionable to use the term Islamic terrorism or Christian terrorism or Jewish terrorism, for that matter. I can speak about the terrorism of the Israelis in treating the Palestinians, or the terrorism of people in Ireland against each other, but that's not Christian terrorism. And I do realize that some of the media use the term Muslim terrorism or Islamic terrorism, even though they don't say Christian or Jewish when it happens there. But I object to any use of the word terrorism alongside with the name of religion, unless we can prove that that religion condoned this. And I don't think with any honest search that you find that any revered religion would advocate this terrorism. I'd just like to add one point to what Jim said, which I think is very important, is that even when people do acts of terror and raise religious banners or use religious symbols, it does not mean still even that it's a religious terrorism. Terrorism is a result of a sort of cruelty or the dark side of the human, you might say. And when the dark side of the human gets into action, it seeks some justification to rally people. Yes, some people say more people have been killed in the name of God or religion than others, but this is a mistaken view. Because even if there is no religion, you can rally people in the name of the ideology of the party. Look at how many millions of people perished in the Cultural Revolution in China or in Soviet Union or other communist-controlled countries, even atheist countries. So my humble view, which is in agreement with Professor Shearer on this, is that human beings try to justify their evil in any way that seems to work with the masses or get respectability. If they justify it on party, fine. If they feel religion is a potent force, they might use the name of religion. I don't think that any sensible Christian would say that Pope Urban in the 11th century, when he started the Crusades and tried even to give theological justification, that this is an honest reading of what the Bible really teaches. It's just a sort of rallying people in one name or the other.
Thank you. Before I go to my second point, by the way, Islamic terrorism was not my term. That was a term used by Newsweek magazine. As a matter of fact, they put it on the front cover. So I'm just trying to project here what I hear, what I read, along with other people living in this country. Sir Dr. Whiskey, I believe they would like to hear from you about the slavery issue. To my understanding, from my limited reading, that slavery, not long ago, was approved by the Pope and the Catholic Church. It was not something to be banned. Also by the Protestants, it had been practiced legally right in front of the eyes of the Church. And I don't want to bring the American history as the latest history of slavery. And when the Muslim side replies, perhaps they can tell us about why slavery in the Quran. And if I had a slave right now, as a Muslim, I'm not going to be, getting out of my faith. I'm going to be practicing faith. Nobody will kick me out because it's illegal to have a slave. So how come on one hand, both respected panelists introduce us to wonderful speech about the religions, but yet you have this in your religion?
Well, unfortunately, what you say is true in large degree. The slave trade was not condemned as it should have been in Catholicism. I'll leave to my colleague Jim Scherer to say something about the Protestant tradition, but certainly in the Catholic tradition, both in terms of the international slave trade and its impact here in the United States, the Catholic Church was late coming to the support of the abolition of slavery. Part of that, I think, was rooted in this biblical passage from the shortest of the biblical books in the New Testament, the letter to Philemon, in which Paul seems to, in the end, say, well, while you have to treat your slave well, you don't have to send him away. I mean, you don't have to give the slave freedom. So that, in a sense, it was seen by some, at least, as a tacit scriptural approval for slavery. And because certain countries like Spain and Portugal had involvement in this, and they were very close to the Vatican, there was no condemnation from the Vatican. In this country, of course, it's very true. Not only did we not condemn it, the Maryland Jesuits owned slaves. The Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina, owned slaves. The Catholic Diocese, in fact, you can go today to the diocesan headquarters in Charleston and still see the remains of the old slave quarters at the back of the Chancery office. And the late bishop once told me that there's stuff in their archives that would really, when it eventually comes out, will really cause a lot of eyebrows to raise. But certainly, it took a long time. Now, one of the problems, as I understand it, I'm not a church historian per se, but as I understand it, the abolitionist movement was also viewed as somewhat an anti-religious movement by some. I think the Catholic, and that was at least one of the problems that supposedly some in the Catholic Church gave for not supporting it. That it was also deep down somewhat anti-religious. Now, I'm like I say, I'm not an American church historian, and I don't know whether there's any validity to that or not. But be that as it may, even if there was some truth to that, it doesn't take away from the failure, I think, to either independently or to look for other coalitions to have done something about that. Basically, the Catholic Church did not really enter a period of desegregation within its own ranks until 1948. Up to 1948, the Catholic Church was not different, was akin to many of the Protestant churches, which had separate black and white units. This was especially true in the South, where in many churches you had independent, poorly staffed black churches, and this is still a remnant of the old slave system, because even once the slaves were freed by the government, black people were never well accepted within the Catholic Church.
Dr. Schiller, would you like to add anything?
Yes, well, I could simply say that many Christian slave owners and slave traders used the scriptures to justify their position. They drew on the tradition of slavery in the Old Testament and the permission of slavery in the New Testament. At the same time, I think it's important to say that the abolition